Imagine waking up one morning in the early 1700s. The fire has burned out, the room is icy, and the only blanket you share is rough wool, full of holes. Hunger gnaws at your stomach before your eyes are even open. For the poor in this century, survival wasn't about living comfortably, it was about clawing through each day with whatever desperate tactic might keep you breathing. Begging, scavenging, and even sleeping in shifts to ward off the cold. These were the shocking measures that turned survival into a daily gamble. Before you drift off, do me a small favor and tap the like button and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment telling me where you are listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim those lights, flip on a fan for that gentle background hum, and tuck yourself under the sheets. Let's pause for a second. We're stepping back to the 1700s, a world where desperation was an everyday companion, where survival meant cunning, sacrifice, and sometimes shocking choices. Trust me, you're going to be very grateful for your central heating, running water, and a stocked fridge. You open your eyes slowly, and the first thing you feel is not the morning sun or the warmth of a blanket, but the dull ache deep in your stomach. It gnaws at you before your mind has even gathered itself. Hunger, a hollow that has lived with you for so long it feels almost like a second body, sharing the same skin. The room around you is still dark, the air cold and unmoving. Your breath hangs in a faint mist above you, and you know there will be no fire waiting in the hearth, no breakfast simmering, no smell of bread in the air. The poor of the 1700s woke to this emptiness more often than not, and today you are among them. The bed is not truly a bed, but a heap of straw packed into a rough wooden frame, flattened from years of use. It scratches at your skin where the thin sheet has slipped away. Beside you, others stir, siblings or parents or cousins, all crowded together for warmth, all breathing shallow to avoid the smoke-stale air trapped in the room. The hunger is not yours alone, it's shared across the faces around you. No one says it aloud. Words are wasted when bellies speak louder than mouths. You sit up slowly, the straw rustling beneath you, and stretch your legs onto the floor. The boards are bare, icy, almost biting. You press your toes into them and feel the sting travel up your body. Somewhere outside a rooster crows, but its call is less an invitation to a new day, and more a reminder there will be work to do, fields to walk, scraps to find. The sound is followed by silence, broken only by the low cough of a child across the room and the creak of the roof beams as the cold presses down. In wealthier homes, the morning begins with buttered bread, porridge, or fresh milk. Here, the morning begins with calculation. What is left? Was there anything put aside from yesterday's labor? A crust tucked in cloth? A spoonful of broth gone cold at the bottom of a pot? Often the answer is nothing. Hunger has a way of clearing shelves faster than any hand can reach. You rise and look around. The pot by the hearth is empty, only the dried traces of last night's thin soup clinging to the iron. The fire has long since died, leaving only grey ash like dust from a dream you can't return to. Your stomach growls, and the sound almost seems to echo in the small room. No one laughs at it, no one jokes. It is simply another part of the morning chorus, as common as the crow of the rooster or the shifting of straw. The hunger shapes everything. It slows your steps, it sharpens your eyes. You notice crumbs where no one else would, a loose potato peel left forgotten, the faint smell of bread drifting from somewhere else, someone wealthier, someone luckier. Hunger makes you listen harder, makes you dream of things as simple as a slice of cheese, a warm loaf, a mug of milk. And yet, as you stand in the quiet room, shoulders cold, stomach twisting, there is no choice but to move forward. Hunger does not pause for pity. It only follows, step for step, into the day ahead. The first movement of the morning is always the hardest, the moment when you must leave the straw, however thin, however itchy, and put your feet onto the floor. The floor is not a friend. It is a slab of wood that has held the night's chill as though it were its own secret. waiting to pass it into the bones of whoever dares to touch it. You press your toes down and the cold shoots upward like a warning. It doesn't matter how many mornings you've done this, it still takes your breath away. You shiver, not just from hunger, but from the bite of winter that seeps in through walls thin as paper. The blanket that covered you was hardly a blanket at all. It is patched upon patched, a quilt stitched from scraps of cloth no one else wanted. The seams are rough, the fabric frayed, and still there is not enough of it to cover the whole body. At night, you curled yourself tightly, pulling it across your shoulders, leaving your feet bare to the dark air. The blanket is not warm, it is a promise, a fragile barrier between you and the open cold. Beside you, the others stir. A brother pulls the corner of the blanket back toward himself, trying to steal warmth where there is none to steal. A sister curls into her own arms, lips blue, face half buried in straw. Your mother shifts, tugging the fabric that is no longer fabric but threadbare memory, and you can see her shoulders trembling beneath it. Everyone knows that the blanket is too thin. Everyone knows that the cold wins each night, and yet, each morning, the fight begins again. You rise, and the air feels colder once you've left the shared body heat of the bed. The room is tight, and still, it feels vast with emptiness. The windows are streaked with frost, glass glimmering pale in the weak light of dawn. A thin crust of ice clings to the inside edges, proof that the cold does not stop at the door. It seeps in, slides under the cracks, rests heavy in the air you breathe. Every breath stings the nose, the throat, as though winter has made its home inside your chest. The floor creaks under your weight, groaning like an old body as you cross the room. You want shoes, but they are thin, the leather cracked, the soles worn nearly through. To wear them indoors feels wasteful, but to go barefoot feels cruel. You step lightly, hoping to lessen the shock, though it doesn't matter. The boards are unforgiving. They carry the cold straight up your legs until your knees feel weak. You glance at the hearth and see it bare, only a ghost of ash left from yesterday. No firewood waits nearby. Firewood costs coin, and coin is a stranger in this house. Sometimes sticks are gathered from the common, but not today, not yet. The room holds only silence and chill. The thin blanket lies crumpled on the bed behind you, and though you long to wrap yourself in it again, you know it will not help. The cold is stronger than fabric, stronger than wishes. It presses against your skin, seeps into your blood, and lingers there. You pull your arms close to your chest, breathe slowly, and stand in the dim light. Another day has begun, and the cold will follow you through every step of it. The night was never a solitary thing. It was crowded, close, and heavy with the sound of others breathing beside you. To sleep alone was a luxury you would never know. Instead, the poor of the 1700s pressed themselves together under one roof, under one blanket, often on one straw mattress that sagged beneath the weight of too many bodies. Shared beds were not a choice, they were survival. You remember the feel of it. The straw beneath your back was prickly and uneven, but that discomfort was quickly overshadowed by the heat of bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder. A brother's arm draped over you in his sleep, a sister curled against your back, a younger child burrowing into your side for warmth. There was no room for shame, no room for modesty. The cold demanded closeness, and you obeyed. In those cramped hours, warmth was not a gift, it was a duty. The blanket above you was never wide enough, so the family learned to share it with an instinct that needed no words. One would pull it up, another would tug it back. Feet stuck out at the edges, bare and cold, so toes would tuck against calves, heels pressing into thighs, trying to steal just a little heat. The night was filled with small battles for comfort, yet it was also filled with the quiet bond of survival. Sometimes, when the frost was at its worst, the straw bed would overflow, children would be laid crosswise at the foot, small bodies overlapping, heads nestled near their parents' ankles. Their breaths rose like mist in the dark, mixing with the sighs of the older ones above. When the fire was gone, when the last ember had died, it was this knot of bodies that kept the cold from carrying you off. You did not sleep deeply, You slept lightly, shifting whenever someone beside you stirred, adjusting when another shivered awake. In wealthier homes, beds were made for one or two, sheets thick, quilts layered, pillows soft. For you, the bed was a single rough frame, or sometimes no frame at all, just straw on the floor, perhaps a plank of wood beneath it if fortune smiled. Privacy was a word for others. Warmth was a word for those who had money. For the poor, there was only sharing. You remember the smell of the bed as well. Smoke from the hearth clinging to cloth, sweat and dust from the day, the faint sourness of damp straw never fully dried. It was not pleasant, but it was familiar. To lie down in it meant safety from the night air that crept through cracks in the wall. To lie down together meant survival. Even in sleep, you could feel the edge of another body against your own, reminding you that you were not facing the cold alone. And when morning came, you rose stiff, sore, tangled in limbs and blankets, but alive. Shared beds did not grant comfort, they granted another chance at tomorrow. And in the world of the 1700s poor, that was the only warmth that truly mattered. The morning begins not with food, but with the long shuffle of feet toward the promise of it. You rise from your straw bed, stomach already aching, and follow the slow tide of others down narrow lanes, slick with frost. The air is damp, your breath heavy, and though the day is new, you already feel the weight of hunger pressing you forward. Breadlines, this is what waits for the poor of the 1700s. A line not of choice but of necessity, drawn by desperation, measured in stomachs growling together. You join the queue outside the parish door or bakery steps, where the first light of dawn glows against shuttered windows. Already the line is long. Mothers hold the hands of thin children, their faces pale, their eyes ringed with shadows. Men stand silent, their shoulders hunched, caps pulled low. Some lean on canes, others clutch baskets, but most carry nothing at all, waiting for whatever might be handed out. The silence is thick, broken only by coughs, shifting feet, and the creak of wooden doors that have not yet opened. The smell comes before the bread itself, the faint, rich scent drifting out from ovens within. It wraps around you like a memory of warmth you cannot touch. The stomach clenches tighter. You breathe it in, but breathing will not fill you. You can see faces lift slightly when the smell grows stronger, as though scent alone were sustenance. But then their eyes fall again, knowing it is only a reminder of what they lack. The wait stretches on, time slows in the cold, fingers numb, toes sting against thin shoes, and still the line holds steady. Some murmur prayers under their breath, others hum to restless children. The children tug at their mothers' sleeves, asking when, asking why, their small voices sharp in the still air. No one answers. Hunger does not have answers, only the command to wait. When at last the door opens, the crowd shifts, pressing forward in cautious waves. Inside, a clerk or parish officer begins to measure out the loaves. Some are stale, yesterday's bread gone hard. Some are crusts broken from larger loaves, gathered in baskets. The lucky ones at the front take them quickly, clutching bread to their chests as though it were gold. For them, the day has given a gift. You watch the line move inch by inch. The loaves dwindle as the baskets empty. You count silently, weighing your place against the pile ahead. Will there be enough? Or will the doors close before you reach them? That is the fear carried in every step, that the hunger will follow you home unchanged. At last, you reach the front. A hand offers you half a loaf, rough and stale but solid in your palm. The weight of it feels heavier than its island. For a moment, the ache in your stomach softens, not because it is full, but because it finally has something to hope for. You turn away, clutching your prize, and join the others walking back into the day. Morning bread lines were not charity. They were survival dressed as mercy, fragile lifelines strung across a world of need. And for the poor, that small loaf, hard and plain, was enough to keep hunger at bay for one more day. The morning is quiet until someone stirs the pot, not with food, but with hope. A hand lifts the iron lid, a spoon scrapes along the bottom, and the sound that answers is hollow. a rattle of metal against bare iron, the sound of an empty pot. It is the sound of hunger made plain, sharper than words, louder than silence. You rise from the bed and hear it before you see it. Someone has already gone to the hearth, has already tilted the blackened pot in search of what isn't there. The scraping echoes through the small room like a bell, summoning every stomach to remember its ache. A child coughs, another stirs, and all eyes drift toward the hearth as though watching might make something appear inside. The pot is heavy with soot, its rim chipped, its belly scarred from years of fire. It has seen countless soups, countless thin broths of barley, cabbage, or bones, boiled down to almost nothing. But today it holds only yesterday's dust, no broth, no crust of bread floating on the surface, not even the oily sheen of fat left behind. Just dryness, just absence. You know the sound well. It is not the same as a full pot, where a ladle clinks gently against broth and vegetables, where the scent of herbs or meat rises with the steam. No, this is a sharp rasping noise, the kind that carries despair in it. A spoon scrapes, and every ear in the room knows the truth. There will be no meal yet. Children are quick to understand even without words. They glance at each other, eyes wide, lips tight, and curl back onto the straw. A mother lowers the lid slowly, as if gentleness might soften the disappointment. A father clears his throat and says nothing. The silence after the scraping is heavier than the sound itself. In wealthier houses, the pots wake with noise and life spoons stirring thick porridges, kettles bubbling, fires crackling under iron. Here, the fire is ash and the pot is mute, except for the hollow rattle when someone dares to look. The day begins with a question mark, with uncertainty, with the empty promise of iron that cannot feed you. You cross the room and look inside for yourself. It is a habit, as though your eyes might find something others have missed. But it is only blackened walls, only the faint smell of smoke and past meals that linger like ghosts. You set the lid down and feel the weight of hunger pressing harder in your stomach, as if to remind you that empty pots are not just sound, they are sentence. Still, the pot remains at the center of the room. No one moves it. No one dares set it aside. Because later, perhaps, someone might bring a crust, a bone, a handful of barley, and when they do, the same pot that speaks emptiness now will hold hope again. But for now, the sound lingers in memory, the scrape, the hollow ring, the quiet sighs afterward. The sound of an empty pot is the anthem of poverty, and it begins and ends each day. The first light of dawn does not bring comfort, it brings duty. Before the sun rises fully, before the streets fill, you must be out searching. Firewood does not come easily, not for the poor of the 1700s. It must be found where it shouldn't be, gathered where scraps are left behind. To wait too long is to return empty-handed, and empty hands mean a cold hearth, a silent room, and another night of shivering. You step outside, breath puffing white into the morning air. The world is still grey, the frost crunching beneath your worn shoes. Behind you, the house lingers in darkness, a family waiting for warmth you have not yet gathered. In your hands is a small bundle of rope or twine, perhaps a basket if you're lucky, but most of all, there is expectation, the need to return with something, anything, that will burn. You walk toward the hedgerows, toward the edges of fields, toward the places where wealthier families have already claimed the larger wood. All that remains for you are the fallen branches, the brittle twigs, the splinters left behind when others have taken the logs. You bend low, fingers stiff in the cold, and pick them one by one. Each stick, each shard of wood, each scrap feels like treasure. You shake the frost from them, tuck them under your arm, and keep moving. The air is silent except for the caw of crows and the distant sound of church bells stirring the day awake. In the villages, children are sent out too, their small hands quick to snatch twigs from ditches and gutters. Some wander along the roadside, scanning the ruts where cartwheels have left broken splinters. Others slip quietly into the woods, eyes sharp, ears alert, hoping not to be seen by keepers who guard the trees as though they were gold. To be caught gathering on the wrong land can mean fines, punishment, or worse. Yet hunger and cold do not heed the law. You know the risk, but you keep searching. The chill cuts deeper the longer you linger outside. Your breath stings in your lungs, your fingertips ache, but still you stoop and gather. Every twig you add to your bundle feels like another hour of fire, another chance to push back the dark. You imagine the hearth alive again, flame dancing, smoke curling, faces leaning close to steal its warmth. By the time the sun lifts higher, your bundle is small but heavy in your arms. It is not enough to last, never enough, but it will give the family a morning fire, a pot to boil water, a moment's reprieve from the cold. As you turn back toward home, the rope digs into your shoulders, but you clutch it tighter. You know that behind you, others are still searching, still scraping the earth for what little the dawn offers. Collecting firewood at dawn was never just a chore, it was survival's first test each day. And for the poor, it was a ritual that bound life to frost and flame, a quiet battle waged in the half-light of every morning. The night is long, longer than it should be, and the cold makes it crueler still. In a house where the fire cannot last until dawn, sleep becomes something rationed, something divided. Families learn the art of sleeping in shifts. Not because it is wanted, but because it is the only way to share what little warmth remains. You lie on the straw bed, wrapped in a blanket too thin to cover everyone. Around you, bodies crowd close, but even so, the air grows colder as the embers in the hearth fade. The fire has nothing more to give. Its glow shrinks, its crackle dies, and soon the room is filled only with darkness and the faint sound of breathing. Those nearest the fire drift toward sleep first, warmed by the last of its heat. Those farther away keep watch, shivering, waiting for their turn to lie closer, waiting for the chance to press against the faintest trace of warmth left in the stones. It is a strange rhythm, this sleeping in shifts. Half the family curled against one another, eyes closed, chasing dreams in fragile slumber, while the others sit upright, arms wrapped around themselves, whispering to keep awake. They rub their hands, blow into them, and listen to the slow breathing of those asleep. And when the time comes, when the sleepers begin to stir with the cold, when the watchers can no longer keep their eyes open, they trade places, moving silently so as not to wake the children. The straw crackles as weight shifts. One rises stiffly, bones aching from the floor, while another lies down in the hollow they have left behind, stealing what little warmth remains in the straw. The blanket is pulled this way, then that, stretched across shoulders and hips, never quite enough. No one protests. There is no arguing when survival depends on quiet cooperation. In wealthier houses, the fire is fed through the night, servants tending the flame, quilts layered thick on featherbeds. But here, the poor know that even rest must be shared like bread or broth. The night is not truly restful. It is a long negotiation with cold and exhaustion. Sleep comes in fragments, in fits, in borrowed hours. You sit awake now, your back against the rough wall, listening to the sound of someone's teeth chattering beside you. Your stomach growls, but you press your arms tighter around yourself to muffle the sound. You wait for the faint warmth of another's body to shift toward you, for your turn to lie down again. Outside, the wind rattles the shutters, reminding you that dawn is still far off. When at last you stretch out again, the straw feels warmer where someone else has just left it. You close your eyes and breathe slowly, trying to sink into that fleeting comfort. You know it will not last. Soon, the others will stir and your turn will end. But for now, in this moment, you surrender to the fragile rhythm of survival, the rhythm of sleeping in shifts, of trading warmth in silence, of enduring the night together 1 hour at a time. The day's work does not always take place in fields or markets. Sometimes, survival is stitched together in quiet corners by the light of a single candle with needle and thread. Clothes for the poor in the 1700s did not come new. They came worn, handed down and handed down again until fabric thinned to air. To keep them alive a little longer, you patched and mended over and over until the garment was more patch than cloth. You sit near the hearth. though no fire burns there now, only the grey dust of yesterday's flame. A torn shirt lies in your lap, its sleeves frayed, the elbows rubbed through. You thread a needle with shaking hands, squinting in the dim light. The thread is rough, often pulled from some other rag sacrificed for the task. The patch you hold is not a neat square cut from fine fabric, but a scrap of whatever could be spared, a bit of sackcloth, a torn piece of apron, sometimes even an old stocking cut apart. Every stitch is clumsy but careful, tugged tight to hold the patch in place. The fabric resists, stiff with dirt and age, and the needle bites your fingers more than once, but you keep going. Each patch means another week before the cloth falls to pieces, another season before you must face the cold with bare skin exposed. You sew not for beauty, but for endurance. Around you, others do the same. A mother repairing a child's trousers, her needle flashing in rhythm. A sister darning stockings, the thin heels reinforced with thread looped back and forth like a web. Even children join, clumsy fingers working with oversized needles, learning early that clothes are not discarded, they are fought for. The garments take on a strange look after so many mends. Colors do not match, patterns clash, the fabric grows heavy with layers. A single coat might carry patches from 5 different sources, each stitched at a different time, each telling its own story. And still, it must be worn proudly, because it is all their island. Better a patched coat than none. Better a shirt with holes sewn shut than a bare chest in the winter wind. In wealthier homes, fashion changes with seasons, silks and linens traded in for the newest style. Here, the fashion is necessity. The only choice is between patched or ruined. There is no shame in mending, but there is weariness. You know the cloth will tear again. You know the knees of trousers will wear thin. The elbows of sleeves will split once more. The cycle never ends. Patch, wear, tear, mend again. The candle burns low as you finish your work. The shirt looks strange, its sleeve patched with sackcloth darker than the rest, the stitches uneven. But it will hold. You fold it carefully, set it aside, and reach for the next garment in need. The pile never grows smaller. Every day adds something new to it, another rip, another fray, another hole born of hard living. Patch and mend again. It is the quiet song of survival, sung not with voices but with thread, each stitch tying poverty to endurance, each knot binding one more day of warmth to a life lived on the edge. Shoes are not shoes anymore. They are relics, thin skins of leather worn so long that the ground presses through them. In the 1700s, the poor did not throw away such things. They endured them, reshaped them, filled them with whatever might keep the frost at bay. Most often, that meant straw. Straw was the poor man's lining, the poor child's cushion, the last barrier between flesh and the unforgiving earth. You wake in the dim grey of morning and look at your shoes by the bed. They are cracked, their seams split, the soles rubbed nearly through. The leather is stiff with damp, curling at the edges where it once bent easily. You reach inside and feel the straw you tucked there last night flattened now, pressed tight by hours of walking. It must be changed if it is to do any good. So you gather fresh handfuls, pulled from the pile near the hearth, straw that was once bedding for animals or stuffing for a mattress. You twist it roughly in your hands, shaping it into bundles small enough to fit the hollow of your shoe. The sound of it crackles sharp in the silence. You push it deep, packing it tight, filling every gap where cold air might creep in. The shoes are heavy now, clumsy, but they are warmer than they were. When you slip your feet inside, the straw prickles against your skin, scratching, tickling, but you welcome it. The roughness is nothing compared to the sting of frozen ground. The straw makes the shoes feel alive again, as though they have something to give, some little comfort left in them. You stand and take a few steps, hearing the faint crunch with each movement. It is not silence, but survival. Children know the ritual best. Their feet grow faster than shoes can be replaced, so straw becomes the difference between blister and frostbite. Mothers tear strips of cloth, wrapping them around toes before adding the straw, layering warmth where leather cannot. Fathers mend holes with patches of wood or thick thread, but still the cold finds its way in, and so the straw remains the faithful answer. On winter roads, you hear it everywhere, the shuffle of shoes packed full, the muffled crunch as men walk to labor, as women carry baskets, as children trudge to gather water or wood. Each step sings of poverty, but also of ingenuity. You use what you have, and what you have is straw. In wealthier homes, shoes are polished, sturdy, fitted to the foot. Here, they are patched and padded, stuffed until they bulge, then worn until they collapse altogether. And when they finally give way, when no amount of straw can keep the ground out, they are passed down still, from parent to child, until nothing remains but leather scraps and memory. Tonight, when you take them off, the straw will spill out, broken into dust, flattened and useless. You will sweep it away, gather fresh handfuls and begin again. Shoes stuffed with straw are not a cure, not a comfort, but they are enough to walk one more day, enough to carry you step by step through a world that offers little else. The pot at the hearth never promised feasts. For the poor of the 1700s, it promised only survival. Stretched thin and ladled carefully. When there was little grain, no meat, no bread to be found, there was still broth water colored by scraps, flavored faintly by bones, peels, or herbs gathered from the wayside. Weak broths, as thin as rainwater, were the meals that carried families through the hardest days. You sit before the iron pot, watching steam rise slowly. The smell is faint, barely there, yet enough to make your stomach twist. Inside the water floats a few cabbage leaves, limp and grey, a shard of onion, maybe a bone gnawed too clean to offer much. Still, it gives something oil slicks shimmer on the surface, tiny islands of fat that catch the candlelight. They are precious, those glimmers. They mean there is at least a trace of nourishment left. A ladle dips, and the broth pours into wooden bowls, thin and pale. No one speaks as it's handed out, because each person knows there isn't much. You cradle the bowl in your hands, feeling its heat seep into your fingers. The warmth is almost as filling as the broth itself. You lift it to your lips, and the first sip burns slightly, then slides down like comfort disguised as water. It tastes of little more than salt and smoke, but to an empty stomach, it is enough. Children slurp greedily, their mouths stained by steam, their eyes closing as though the broth were a banquet. They gnaw on the bone if one has been dropped into the pot, biting for scraps of marrow that may or may not be there. Others stir their bowls slowly, savoring the heat, stretching it as long as they can. Hunger teaches patience, but it also teaches desperation, and broth demands both. Wealthier homes know soups thick with barley, meat stews, bread to soak up the juices. But for you, broth is a shadow of those things, a pale cousin of real food. It is not about fullness, it is about tricking the body, giving it warmth to quiet the pangs, moisture to ease the ache. A weak broth fills the silence in your stomach just long enough to let you sleep. Sometimes wild herbs are thrown in, nettles, dandelion greens, even weeds plucked from the roadside. They give the broth bitterness, but they also give color, and sometimes that is enough to make it feel like a meal. On the best nights, a bone is added and boiled for hours, until the water takes on its strength. On the worst, it is only water with a pinch of salt, and still it is sipped slowly, reverently, because water dressed as food is still better than nothing at all. When the bowls are emptied, the silence lingers. The pot is scraped, rinsed, and set back at the hearth to wait for tomorrow. Tomorrow something else may be found, a heel of bread, a stray potato, a bone left behind at the butcher's stall. And tomorrow, again, there will be broth. Thin, weak, fragile, but a lifeline all the same. The gate stands tall, iron or wood, a barrier between those who have and those who do not. At its base, in the chill of morning, beggars gather. Their clothes hang loose, patched beyond recognition, faces drawn thin by hunger. They wait because the gate is not just a door, it is a threshold of possibility. Sometimes bread comes through it, sometimes a coin dropped into an open palm, sometimes nothing at all. Yet still they come, because for the poor of the 1700s, waiting at a gate could mean the difference between a day endured and a night of despair. You join them, shuffling close to the wall where the wind cuts less. The stones beneath you are cold, and your shoes stuffed with straw barely soften the bite. Around you sit others, a woman rocking an infant wrapped in rags, an old man whose cough rattles the morning air, children with hollow eyes staring past everything. They murmur softly, voices carrying fragments of prayer, fragments of plea. Some hold bowls, some extend bare hands, others only bow their heads, waiting for kindness they cannot demand. The sound of hooves on cobblestones makes everyone stir. A carriage approaches, wheels clattering, horses snorting plumes of steam. Heads lift, eyes follow, hope flickers like a flame in the cold air. Perhaps someone inside will lower the window, drop a crust, toss a coin. You rise to your knees, hand half raised, and watch as the carriage rolls past without slowing. Dust and frost spray from the wheels, landing on your clothes, your skin. The gate remains closed. The people sink back into silence. This is the rhythm of the gate, the long wait, the sudden stir of hope, the quick return to stillness. Some days a servant does come out, basket in hand, scattering hard bread like seed to pigeons. The beggars scramble, hands clawing, voices calling out thanks even for scraps. Other days a coin is tossed, gleaming briefly before it vanishes into the dirt and is fought over by desperate fingers. And often, nothing happens at all. Hours pass, the cold grows deeper. Hunger sharpens its teeth, and still, the gate looms, silent and impassive. The humiliation is heavy, but heavier still is the necessity. To beg is to be exposed, to show need openly, to rely on the mercy of others. Yet behind the gate, food is stored in pantries, fires burn steadily, tables are laid with meat and bread. The contrast is sharp, like a knife pressed against the skin. You sit outside and feel it, knowing that warmth and plenty are only a few feet away, yet unreachable. As dusk falls, the beggars thin. Some leave empty-handed, faces set in quiet resignation. Others stay until the last light fades, unwilling to abandon the chance that something, anything, might yet come. You rise stiffly, your hand numb from holding it out so long. The gate has not opened for you today. You turn back toward the narrow streets, hunger walking at your side, already waiting for tomorrow's vigil. Beggars at the gate were not strangers to the 1700s. They were the shadow that wealth cast, the reminder that survival was uneven and that mercy was never guaranteed. Work was never measured in wages alone. For the poor of the 1700s, labor was often exchanged for something far smaller, far humbler. A crust of bread, a ladle of broth, a handful of grain. To trade hours of strength, days of sweat, for crumbs that was survival. It was not dignity, but it was life. And so the poor bent their backs, even when the reward would never fill a stomach. You begin before dawn, when the streets are grey and the frost still clings to rooftops. Your body aches from yesterday's toil, but hunger leaves you no choice. A landowner or merchant might call, and if you are ready, you might earn your meal. If you are late, another desperate soul will take your place, and you will return empty-handed. So you go, stomach hollow, hands raw, waiting for the chance to sell your strength for food. At the fields, the work is endless. Stones pulled from the soil, weeds torn by hand, heavy baskets carried from one side to the other. The overseer watches, measuring not your endurance but your desperation. He knows you will not quit, not while your children wait at home with nothing. When noon comes, the wealthy eat from baskets packed with bread, cheese, and ale. You watch from a distance until one of them tosses a crust, hard and stale, into the dirt. You scramble for it, dust it clean, and eat it in 3 bites. That is your wage. In towns, the rhythm is the same. A shopkeeper calls you to unload barrels, sweep floors, scrub steps slick with mud. Hours pass. your back bent, your arms trembling, until he finally hands you the scrapings from his table, a bruised apple, a piece of bread gone tough, broth cloudy and thin. You bow in thanks, though you know it will not last the night. Pride is a luxury you cannot afford when hunger claws inside you. Children labor too, their small hands quick to stitch or spin, their feet swift to carry loads. They are given the thinnest of wages, a heel of bread, a spoon of porridge, sometimes only the promise of tomorrow's meal. Yet they work as fiercely as their parents, because hunger does not spare the young. Their laughter fades into silence, replaced by the steady scrape of tools, the shuffle of tired feet. Wealthier eyes see you and look away. To them, crumbs are nothing. To you, they are everything. A single loaf might feed you for days, but it is never given. Instead, crumbs are tossed like favors, reminders that you live by the mercy of others. Still, you take them, clutch them, share them carefully with those at home. Better crumbs than nothing. Better a spoonful of broth than an empty pot. When night comes, you return with your prize, however small. The family gathers, tearing the bread into equal pieces, sipping the broth slowly. It does not fill you, but it quiets the gnawing for a time. Tomorrow, you will rise again, ready to bend your back once more. Trading labor for crumbs is not fair, it is not just, but it is survival, and survival is all you can claim. The day's labor does not end when the fields grow dark or the shops close their doors. For the poor of the 1700s, night was not a time of rest, but another chance to earn survival. When the sun slipped behind the rooftops and the village settled into shadows, candles were lit, and hands returned to work. The faint glow of tallow or beeswax stretched the day into long hours, and in that weak light, families toiled. You sit at the table, a stub of candle flickering before you. Its flame dances in the draught, barely enough to illuminate the cloth in your lap. A needle flashes in and out, pulling thread through torn seams, darning socks, patching coats. Each stitch is slow, your eyes straining, your fingers sore. The candle smokes faintly, filling the room with its greasy smell. The wax drips, hardening in uneven trails down its side, a silent reminder that the night is passing and your light is running out. Around you, the room is alive with quiet industry. A father sharpens tools for the next day, the rasp of metal on stone steady and rhythmic. A mother bends over a spinning wheel, turning scraps of wool into thread, her foot tapping the treadle in a constant beat. Children sit cross-legged, their small fingers sorting rags, winding yarn, or plucking feathers for pillows they may never sleep on. The air hums with low voices, with coughs, with the rustle of fabric. This is night work, not chosen, but demanded. The pennies earned from stitching for neighbors, spinning for merchants, or mending for farmers might mean bread tomorrow. Sometimes it means only enough for a crust. Still, the poor bend to the task, because idle hands mean empty stomachs. By candlelight, the world shrinks to the circle of flame, to the cloth, the tool, the task at hand. Everything else, fatigue, hunger, the ache in your back, must be ignored. The candle burns lower, and the shadows creep closer. Your eyes blur, and the stitches wander crooked, but you press on. Each moment is precious. Each inch of thread, each length of yarn, each mended sleeve is a promise traded for food. You hear the sigh of someone across the table, their head nodding forward, then jerking back upright. Sleep tempts, but sleep must wait. Outside, wealthier homes lie quiet, their inhabitants dreaming under heavy quilts. Their fires burn through the night without thought, their tables cleared of meals uneaten. But here, in the dim glow of one fragile flame, life is bargained hour by hour. Work becomes prayer, each stitch a plea for endurance, each candle a measure of hope. At last, when the wick is nearly gone and wax puddles around its base, you set the needle aside. Your eyes ache, your shoulders throb, and the night has slipped into silence. You blow gently, and the flame dies, smoke curling into the dark. The room falls black, the tasks unfinished, the hunger still waiting. Tomorrow, You will rise with the dawn, labor all day, and return again to night work by candlelight. For the poor, there is no end, only the steady rhythm of survival stitched into every hour. The poorhouse looms like a shadow at the edge of the town. Its walls are tall and grey, its doors heavy, and its windows stare blankly outward as if they too have given up hope. To enter here is not a choice, it is the final step when every scrap of bread has been eaten, every coin spent, every friend's kindness worn thin. For the poor of the 1700s, the poorhouse was a place of last resort, a place where hunger might be quieted, but dignity was stripped away. You step through the doors, and the first thing you notice are the eyes, dozens of them, hollow and sunken, turned toward you. They belong to men and women who were once workers, once farmers, once mothers and fathers with their own homes. Now they sit in rows on hard benches, their bodies wrapped in coarse uniforms of the institution. Their gazes follow you with a mixture of pity, fear, and resignation. It is not cruelty in their eyes, it is the reflection of what you are becoming. The air smells of damp stone and thin gruel. The hall is wide but empty of warmth, its walls bare, its windows letting in more draught than light. The floor is swept clean, but the silence is heavy. Somewhere, children shuffle, their bare feet slapping against the boards as they are herded into workrooms. The older ones carry baskets of wool or linen, their small hands raw from spinning. The younger ones simply sit, too weak to do more. Food comes at strict hours, a ladle of broth, a crust of bread, perhaps porridge if the day is kind. It fills the mouth but never the stomach. You eat quickly because there is no savoring, only swallowing. The meal is gone before you taste it, and you sit again with the same hunger gnawing, only dulled for an hour. Around you the others eat in silence, eyes lowered, bowls clutched like lifelines. Work fills the hours between meals. Men break stones, men tools, or haul heavy loads. Women scrub, sew, and spin until their fingers bleed. Children, no matter how small, are set to tasks that keep their hands busy. The poorhouse is not meant to comfort, it is meant to discipline, to remind you that poverty carries a price. The labor is endless, the reward meager, and the walls close in more each day. At night, you are led to the dormitory. Long rows of cots stretch across the room, each with a thin blanket, each filled with a body turned inward, hollow eyes staring into the dark. The coughs echo, the sighs rise, and sleep comes only in fragments. Dreams, if they come, are of freedom, dreams of fireside warmth, of fields outside, of homes long lost. The poorhouse does not kill you, but it takes pieces of you day by day. The body grows weaker, the spirit duller, until your reflection matches the hollow eyes around you. And when you look up and see those same eyes in the faces of others, you realize the truth. The poorhouse was never built to save you. It was built to contain you, to remind the world outside that poverty has a place, and it is here, behind cold stone walls. The harvest is long past, the wagons already rolled away, heavy with grain, the land left bare and quiet. For the poor, however, the fields are never empty. They become places of return, places to scrape and scavenge for whatever has been overlooked. It is called gleaning, but to you it feels more like scraping the slow, back-bent hunt for survival in the stubble of someone else's plenty. You walk at dawn, basket in hand, your shoes crunching against frozen furrows. The soil is hard, scarred with ruts from carts, brittle stalks still jutting like broken teeth. Around you, others move silently, their heads bent low, their eyes scanning the ground for a missed ear of corn, a scattering of barley, a potato fallen from a careless hand. The fields are quiet but alive with hunger, each figure hunched and searching, every movement sharp with need. Your fingers grow numb quickly, but still you stoop, plucking grain heads from the dirt, shaking mud from them before tucking them into your basket. Sometimes you find nothing but husks, chewed by birds or spoiled by damp. Other times, a stalk bends under your hand, heavy with a few precious kernels. These moments feel like discovery, like treasure. Though the reward is small, you pocket it anyway. Nothing is wasted, nothing is left behind. Children trail alongside, their small hands darting into furrows, their voices hushed. They carry rags instead of baskets, filling them with scraps of straw or weeds to bring home for the animals, or sometimes even for the fire. They know the rules as well as you. Take what has been missed. Leave nothing that belongs to the landowner. The boundary is thin, and crossing it means punishment. But hunger pushes close to that line, and sometimes further. The sound of scraping fills the air, the scratch of fingers against soil, the tug of stalks pulled from the earth, the rustle of baskets filling grain by grain. It is not enough to still the belly, not enough to fill the pot, but it stretches life one more day. A handful of gleaned barley might become porridge, a potato or two might thicken a broth. Each scrap is added carefully, each meal built from fragments scavenged where others saw nothing left. Above you, crows wheel in the pale sky, their cries harsh, their wings black against the light. They too search for what remains, pecking at husks, tugging at fallen seed. In them you see a mirror creatures scavenging after plenty has been taken, surviving on what others do not want. You do not resent them, you understand them. Hunger binds all who scrape the fields. When the sun climbs higher, your basket is still light. The work is slow, the reward thin. Your back aches, your knees sting from kneeling on frozen ground. But you continue until the shadows shorten. At last, when you lift the basket and feel its small weight, you know it is not enough. But it is something, and for the poor, something is survival. Scraping the fields is not labor you boast of, not work you choose. It is a quiet, desperate ritual, repeated season after season, generation after generation. It teaches you to search in emptiness, to find life in remnants, and to walk home with a basket that holds not just scraps, but the stubborn will to endure. Water was never trusted. In the villages and towns of the 1700s, it ran cloudy from wells, foul from rivers, often carrying sickness with every sip. For the poor, there was only one way to drink safely, and that was ale, not the strong, heady drink of the wealthy, but a weak, bitter brew, thin as broth, brewed only to make water fit to swallow. It was not luxury, it was survival. You sit at the rough table, a wooden cup before you. The liquid inside is pale, cloudy, and smells faintly of grain left too long in the Sunday. It is not pleasant, but you raise it anyway, because thirst leaves no room for choice. The first sip is sharp on your tongue, sour at the edges, and then thin, almost watery, as it slides down your throat. The bitterness lingers, but so does the warmth it carries. You know it has been boiled, brewed, made safe by fire. You drink again, grateful not for taste, but for the promise it will not sicken you. Children drink it too. Their cups are smaller, their gulps cautious, but they are taught early that ale is safer than water. Weak ale fills their bellies when bread cannot. It gives them strength enough to stumble through chores, to glean in fields, to carry baskets beside their mothers. Their cheeks flush slightly after too much, their laughter rising for a moment before fading back into hunger's silence. The making of it is a ritual in itself. Grain scraps, barley husks, sometimes even old bread, are boiled and steeped, fermented just enough to ward off foulness. The brew is weak, barely stronger than tea, yet it keeps illness at bay. In the poor cottages, barrels stand in corners, their lids loose, their smell souring the air. Women dip ladles into them, pouring out cups for children, husbands, even for the sick, who can swallow little else. You remember the mornings when your head ached from drinking too quickly, when the bitterness curled your stomach. Still, it was better than thirst, better than the risk of drawing water from a ditch that might carry fever. Weak ale became the constant companion of poverty, never joyful, never refreshing, but steady, always there when nothing else could be. The wealthy drank fine wines, dark beers, and strong spirits, raising their cups in laughter at long tables. For the poor, ale was not a toast but a tool, a shield against the unseen dangers of water. Its bitterness was endured, not savored. Each sip was a reminder that survival tasted harsh. At night, when work was done and the fire burned low, you sipped the last of it slowly, letting the warmth spread through your tired body. It dulled the ache in your limbs, softened the edge of hunger, made sleep come a little easier. It was not comfort, but it was something close to it. The bitter ale of survival was never sweet, never strong, but it kept you alive. And in a world where every day was a battle against hunger and cold, that alone made it precious. Hunger has a voice of its own. It growls in the belly, rumbles in the stillness, makes itself known at the most helpless moments. But for the poor of the 1700s, hunger was not always something spoken of. It was hidden, pressed down, wrapped in silence. To speak of it was to risk despair, to remind others of their own emptiness. And so whole families learned to live with quiet, their stomachs crying out while their mouths remained closed. You sit in the dim light of the cottage, straw scattered on the floor, the hearth cold. The children are awake, their eyes wide, their hands folded in their laps. You hear it clearly, the hollow echo of their hunger. A small one presses a hand to her stomach, but she does not speak. An older boy glances toward the cupboard, though he knows it is bare. No one asks. No one dares. The silence is heavy, thicker than the air, and every breath feels like part of the pact, not to say aloud what everyone feels. The ritual of meals makes the silence sharper. At supper, when a crust is divided into too many pieces, the sharing is wordless. Each hand reaches, each mouth chews slowly, pretending the bite is larger than its island. The scraping of wooden bowls becomes the only sound, a faint, mournful music. When the bowls are empty, no one complains. Instead, they push them aside gently, as though to make less noise, as though to hide the truth that there is nothing more to give. Children learn early to hold back their cries. A mother may hush them with a hand, whispering that the bread will come tomorrow, that work will bring food, that the church might give alms. But even her words falter, and soon she falls into silence too. Fathers swallow their shame, sitting with arms folded, their lips pressed thin. They cannot bear to admit out loud that they have nothing left to offer. Outside, neighbors pass, and you greet them with nods, with small words that carry no weight. Hunger is not confessed in public. It is hidden like a wound. Pride demands it, but so does survival. To admit hunger too often is to invite pity, or worse, to mark yourself as weak. So you walk with steady steps, your mouth shut, while inside your stomach twists like rope. The silence stretches into the night. As you lie down to sleep, the bed is crowded, the blankets thin, and still the loudest thing in the room is the hunger that no one names. You turn onto your side, pressing your belly against your knees, as if curling tightly will muffle the ache. Beside you, another shifts, sighs softly, then grows still again. Not a word is spoken, not a complaint uttered. Only breathing, slow and careful, fills the dark. Hunger is loud, but the poor learn to meet it with quiet. The silence was a shield, a way to carry pain without breaking apart, a way to endure without crumbling into despair. To hide hunger with silence was to hold on to dignity, even when the body cried for mercy. It was a silence heavy with need, but also heavy with strength. The city wakes early, long before the markets fill with noise and trade. For the poor, dawn is not a time of purchase but of search. The streets themselves become a hunting ground, littered with scraps that others discard. To scavenge the city is to comb through its refuse, to bend low among the gutters and piles, to gather what others would never think to touch. It is work without dignity, yet it is work that keeps you alive. You step onto the cobblestones, the morning air damp with smoke and sewage. The alleyways smell of yesterday's waste, sour beer spilled from taverns, fish guts tossed from stalls, bread crusts trampled into the dirt. Already others are there, figures hunched in the half-light, skirts dragging, hands darting. They search with practiced eyes, swift and sharp, knowing where to look. You join them. your gaze sweeping the ground for anything that might fill a stomach, warm a body, or fetch a coin. A butcher's boy passes, carrying buckets heavy with offal. Behind him, a trail of scraps falls, bits of fat, gristle, bone. Quick hands snatch them before the dogs can. A woman scoops up a bone slick with marrow and tucks it into her apron. You find a shard yourself, cracked but still rich enough to flavor broth. Into your basket it goes, treasure plucked from dirt. Along the market stalls, before the day's goods are laid fresh, you pick through what was left the night before. Bruised apples, their skins torn but their flesh still sweet in places. Wilted greens, yellowed at the edges but not yet spoiled. A loaf of bread, hard as stone, abandoned in the gutter. You break it apart, knowing that soaked in broth it will soften enough to eat. Each find is small, but together they build a meal where none existed. Not everything scavenged is food. Rags are gathered too, scraps of cloth from tailors' bins, rope from broken crates, bits of coal dropped from carts. Children crawl into drains for lost nails, shards of wood, even buttons that can be sold. Nothing is beneath notice. Everything has worth when you have nothing. The streets are not kind to scavengers. Shopkeepers chase you off, shouting curses, brandishing sticks. Dogs snap at your heels, noses sharp for the same scraps you seek. Wealthier passers-by wrinkle their noses, pulling their coats tighter as they step around you, yet you continue, head low, hands quick, because hunger does not care for shame. Hunger demands you scrape, you stoop, you search until your basket is filled with fragments of the city's waste. By midday, you return home, your basket heavier though far from full. Inside are bones, crusts, bruised fruit, rags that might be patched into clothes. You set them on the table, and for a moment the silence lifts. Children's eyes brighten, hands reaching eagerly. Tonight, there will be broth. There will be something to chew. There will be warmth enough to last until morning. Scavenging city streets is not noble, not clean, not safe, but it is survival, pieced together from what others step over. In the cracks of the city, where refuse gathers, life is found by those willing to bow low enough to claim it. Snow does not fall kindly on the poor, it comes heavy and deep, muffling the world in white silence. And though it seems beautiful from afar, it is merciless underfoot. For those with strong boots and thick coats, it is only a season to endure. But for the poor of the 1700s, snow was an enemy. One fought with thin shoes that barely held together, soles worn through, leather cracked, stitching loose. Against the weight of winter, such shoes offered little defense. You step outside, the air sharp and biting, your breath a pale cloud in the dim morning. The snow lies deep across the road, piled against doorways, covering ruts and stones. Your shoes, patched too many times, sag with age. The leather has grown soft with damp, the soles thin enough that the outline of each stone presses through. You take a step, and the cold surges upward instantly, a sting that makes you catch your breath. Children fare no better. They tramp behind you, their feet wrapped in cloth and twine, their shoes too small or too broken to keep out the wet. They laugh at first, stomping in the drifts, but their laughter fades quickly as the snow seeps in, numbing toes, burning ankles. Mothers scold them to keep moving, to stamp their feet, to keep the blood alive in them. For to stop too long is to risk frost creeping in, silently, cruelly. The snow clings to everything. It cakes along the seams of your shoes, melts through the cracks, soaks the straw you stuffed there for insulation. Soon, each step feels like walking barefoot through ice. Your toes grow stiff, unresponsive, and still you must walk toward the fields, toward the market, toward the breadlines that may or may not have something to give. Wealthy men pass by in boots lined with fur, their steps firm, their bodies wrapped in cloaks that shed the cold like water. You lower your eyes as they walk, unwilling to let them see the shame of your sagging shoes, the way you stumble in the drifts. They may toss a coin or they may not. Either way, they keep walking, their faces flushed with warmth, while you and yours sink deeper into the snow. At home, the shoes are set by the hearth to dry, though the hearth has no fire to give. They sit damp and stiff, smelling of leather and wet straw, waiting for the next day's march. Children huddle near them, rubbing their feet, blowing on their toes, their skin red and raw. A mother wraps rags tighter, murmuring that spring will come soon, though even she does not believe it. The snow outside glitters like a sheet of silver, but for you it is only hardship, only hunger made colder. Thin shoes in thick snow do not carry you far, but they carry you far enough to survive another day. And for the poor, that was all that could be asked. One more day, one more walk through the deep white silence, one more battle between leather and winter. The tenement is more prison than home, a stacked hive of narrow rooms pressed close together, built for bodies rather than lives. The poor of the 1700s filled these places when the city grew too tight, when work pulled them in from the countryside, when there was no other roof to be found. Here, walls are thin, floors creak, and the air itself turns heavy, stale with breath and smoke. You climb the crooked stairs, each step groaning under your weight, the railing smooth from countless hands. The hall is dim, a single candle guttering at the far end, its light swallowed by shadow. The door to your room hangs uneven on its hinges, and when you push it open, the air inside greets you like a wall. It is thick, damp, and sour, a mixture of unwashed bodies, smoke from low fires, and the faint rot of food long gone. There are no windows that open wide enough to chase it out. The air has lived here as long as you have. The room itself is small, its ceiling low. A bed of straw lies in the corner, flattened by the weight of too many bodies. The walls are stained with soot where candles have burned too close, and damp creeps in at the edges, leaving dark patches that never dry. Clothes hang from nails hammered into the wood, patched and mended so often they no longer resemble what they once were. Children sit on the floor, their faces pale, their coughs echoing in the cramped space. Each breath they take feels as though it must pass through every other chest in the room before reaching their own. At night, the air grows worse. The fire is small, just enough to give light but not warmth. Smoke curls upward, curling around the beams, filling the corners. You lie down in the straw and feel it sting your throat, catch in your chest. The coughing never stops, first a child, then a mother, then another voice answering back from the room next door. The walls do not keep sound apart. The tenement is one body, breathing heavily, wheezing together through the dark hours. In the morning, the smell of the tenement clings to you. It seeps into your hair, your clothes, your skin. When you step outside, the fresh air of the street feels sharp, almost painful, but you gulp it down as though it were food. For a moment, you breathe freely, until you realize you must return again, back into the stale rooms where life is stacked one on top of another. Wealthy homes have space, windows that open, fires that burn clean. Here, the air is a burden carried every day. It weakens the body, softens the bones, and leaves you tired before work even begins. But still, the tenement is all you have. Better stale air than no roof at all. The tenement does not kill quickly. It kills slowly, with every breath drawn from its heavy, stagnant air. And yet, for the poor, it remains the only shelter, the only walls to hold back the cold night, the only place to sleep no matter how thick and bitter the air becomes. Not every poor family in the 1700s had even a bed to call their own. Some lived too tightly, too many bodies crammed into too few rooms, while others drifted from place to place, taking shelter wherever a corner could be found. To borrow a bed was to rely on kin or neighborly mercy. To borrow a corner was to accept survival at its lowest. To lay your head anywhere there was space enough to rest. You step into a crowded room, the air thick with smoke and bodies. The hearth glows faintly, its warmth too weak to reach the edges. Along one wall lies a bed, a straw mattress pressed flat by the weight of many, its sheet patched and patched again. It already holds a family, their limbs overlapping, their faces slack with exhaustion. Tonight, you are given not the bed itself, but the edge of it, a strip of straw barely wide enough for your shoulders. You slip in carefully, pressing against the rough wall, trying not to wake the ones who already sleep. The straw pricks your skin. The blanket, if it can be called that, covers you only halfway. Still, it is more than you had outside, more than the streets would give. Around you, others breathe deeply, their snores rising and falling like waves. You breathe with them, trying to match their rhythm, trying to forget that this space is borrowed, that tomorrow you may be elsewhere, searching again. Not everyone is given the edge of a bed. Many are left to corners, dark spaces where walls meet, where floors are bare, where straw is scattered as a token of comfort. You remember lying in one such corner, knees pulled to your chest, the draft sneaking in through a crack in the boards. Sleep comes slowly there, broken by every cough, every shifting body, every creak of the building. Yet exhaustion is stronger than discomfort, and eventually even a corner is enough. Children take corners often, curled together like puppies, their small bodies warming one another. A rag is thrown over them, and they drift into uneasy dreams, their stomachs rumbling in the quiet. Parents glance toward them, guilt heavy in their eyes. But what else can be done? There is no space, no mattress to spare. The corner must suffice. Neighbors share what little they can. A widow with a single bed might let a mother and child sleep across its foot. A cousin might clear a corner of his own crowded room for a brother down on luck. These borrowed spaces keep the poor alive, though they also remind them daily of their dependence, of the fragility of their place in the world. In wealthier homes, each child lies in a bed of their own, under blankets thick and soft. Here, you measure comfort not in quilts but in inches of straw, in the mercy of a friend, in the chance to rest where the wind cannot reach you. Borrowed beds and corners do not grant peace, but they grant survival. When morning comes, you rise quietly, smoothing the straw, folding the rag, leaving the space as if you had never been there. You thank your host softly, with words or with a nod, then step back into the cold day. Tonight, you may find another bed, another corner, or none at all. And so life continues, carried not by ownership, but by the kindness of borrowed spaces. Charity was rarely given freely. For the poor of the 1700s, bread, broth, or a coin often came with a price, the price of listening. Before the pot was ladled or the loaf was handed out, the hungry were gathered into pews or courtyards, made to sit still as the words of a sermon washed over them. They were sermons about sin, about gratitude, about obedience. Charity, it seemed, had to be earned not with work alone, but with patience, humility, and silence. You shuffle into the chapel, your shoes damp from the morning mud, your stomach aching from emptiness. Around you, others file in, children clinging to mothers' skirts, old men leaning on sticks. The air is sharp with the smell of wet wool and unwashed bodies. The pews creak under the weight of so many, the crowd pressed close together, each face pale and hollow. Everyone is here for the same reason, not for the sermon, but for the bread promised at its end. The minister climbs to the pulpit, his robes heavy, his voice stern. He speaks of duty, of God's judgment, of the dangers of idleness. He tells the poor they must bear their suffering with patience, that their hunger is a trial of faith. His words roll on, filling the space, echoing against the wooden beams. You sit and listen because you must, your hands folded, your eyes lowered. The sermon stretches long, your stomach tightening with each passing minute. Children shift restlessly beside you. A mother hushes them with a touch, whispering that food will come soon, that they must wait. Their small feet dangle above the floor, kicking softly against the pew. One coughs, the sound sharp in the quiet. The minister pauses, frowning, before continuing louder, as though his words might drown out the body's protest. You hear little of what he says. The hunger drowns it, the thought of bread waiting beyond the sermon consuming more of your mind than Scripture ever could. Yet still you sit, because to leave is to forfeit your chance. Patience is demanded, and so you give it. You nod when others nod, bow your head when prayers are spoken, though your thoughts are fixed on the table in the next room. At last, the sermon ends. The congregation stirs, weary but eager, rising as one. You file toward the door where parish officers wait with baskets. Bread is broken into hands, crusts handed out, bowls of thin broth ladled for the children. The food is plain, meager, but it is received with gratitude that feels half forced, half real. Some murmur thanks to the minister, others whisper prayers of relief as they eat quickly, silently. For the wealthy, sermons are a time for reflection, for the comfort of faith. For the poor, they are toll gates, passages through which you must pass to receive sustenance. Charity sermons were never just words, they were reminders of power, of dependence, of how survival was tethered not only to labor, but to listening. And so you endured them, week after week, hungry in body but forced to feed first on lessons before a single crumb touched your lips. For the poor of the 1700s, survival often demanded sacrifice. When food was scarce, when rent pressed heavy, when the cupboard was bare and the pot empty, children themselves became the means of payment. Not in coin, not in goods, but in labor, in service, in futures traded away too soon. Children were currency bargained, lent, or bound to keep a family alive. You watch a father at the doorway, his hand resting on the shoulder of his son, no more than 8 years old. The boy's eyes are wide, his clothes patched thin, his shoes already worn through. A farmer stands outside, waiting. He needs another pair of hands for the fields, and he offers bread and a few coins in exchange. The boy glances up, searching his father's face for assurance, for love, but finds only the heavy shadow of necessity. With a nod, the father sends him away, not out of cruelty, but because there is no other way to keep the rest of the family fed. In cottages and tenements, these trades are spoken of quietly, behind closed doors. A daughter sent to a wealthier home as a maid, scrubbing floors and carrying water, in exchange for meals she may not even eat. A son apprenticed, bound to years of labor with little pay, his small body already stooped by the weight of tools. Sometimes the arrangement is formal, written on paper with signatures and seals. More often, it is a handshake, a promise sealed by hunger. Mothers weep in silence as their children are taken, but tears cannot fill empty pots. They watch their daughters carried off with bundles of clothes, knowing they will not return for months, perhaps years. They whisper prayers that their little ones will be treated kindly, that they will not be beaten or starved, that they will not forget the faces left behind. The poor learn to live with absence as much as with hunger. Children themselves understand sooner than they should. They stand in fields with hands raw from pulling weeds. They carry pails heavier than their own arms. They stitch by candlelight until their fingers bleed. At first, they cry, then they grow quiet, then they simply endure. The innocence of childhood is traded away for survival, and there is no bargaining to get it back. The wealthy, meanwhile, treat these children as tools, useful, replaceable, cheap. A boy is praised for his strength, a girl for her diligence, but neither is seen as more than labor. Payment goes not to them but to their parents, or worse, only in the form of scraps sent home. And yet, the poor accept this, because without it, there would be nothing at all. At night, families gather around the hearth, smaller now, emptier. They speak of the child who has gone away, wondering if he has eaten, if she has slept, if they still think of home. The silence is heavy, but so is the bread in their hands, the bread bought with that absence. Children as currency was the cruel arithmetic of poverty. It was a trade no parent wished to make, yet one that countless were forced to accept. In a world where survival demanded payment, the smallest shoulders often carried the greatest cost. The market is loud with voices, heavy with smells, roasted meats, fresh bread, baskets of apples piled high. But for the poor of the 1700s, the market was not a place of purchase. It was a place of waiting, of watching, of hoping that scraps might fall. You did not come with coins in your pocket. You came with patience, with hunger in your belly, and with eyes sharp enough to catch what others left behind. You stand at the edge of the square, pressed against the wall of a stall. Merchants shout their wares, fish still glistening with sea spray, cheeses soft and golden, cuts of beef laid heavy on the boards. Customers point and choose, their purses clinking, their baskets filling. You watch their hands, not the goods. You wait for the apple rejected as too bruised, the loaf set aside for being too stale, the fish head tossed away after the body has been cut. Scraps are the poor man's harvest, gathered not from soil but from the refuse of plenty. Children are quick at this work. They dart between legs, eyes fixed on the ground, snatching crusts before they are trampled. A boy finds a cabbage leaf fallen from a cart and clutches it like treasure. A girl lifts a broken egg, its shell cracked but its yolk still clinging, and carries it carefully home. Their hands are quick, their bodies small enough to slip unseen. Hunger teaches them swiftness, survival teaches them silence. Behind the stalls the refuse piles grow. Bones stripped of meat, bruised fruit, stale bread, hard as stone. Dogs sniff at them, crows circle above, and among them the poor bend low, picking through what remains. You reach for a fish tail, slick and cold, imagining it boiled into broth. You gather apple cores, cutting away the rot, leaving only the pale flesh clinging to the sides. These are not meals, not as others know them, but they are food enough to quiet a stomach. Sometimes a kind merchant turns a blind eye, letting the poor take what they know they cannot sell. Other times a boot lashes out, a hand strikes, a voice curses, driving scavengers away from the scraps. Yet you return each day because there is no other choice. To glean from the market's waste is to live another night. To miss a day is to go hungry. At home, the scraps are laid on the table like prizes. A pot is filled with water, the bones dropped in, the leaves and cores added, the stale bread softened in the broth. The smell rises faint but comforting, filling the room with something that feels like a meal. Children gather round, their eyes bright, waiting for bowls to be filled. The scraps become sustenance, transformed by fire into survival. The market is not for the poor, not in the way it is for others. It is not a place of abundance but of leftovers, not a place of choice but of chance. Yet in every crust, every peel, every bone there is life. Scraps from the market were the poor man's portion, meager, humble, but enough to keep hunger just one step behind. Not all trade in the 1700s was measured in coin or goods. For the poor, who often had little to give, survival sometimes meant offering what could not be held in the hand: secrets, whispers, knowledge passed quietly from one to another. To trade in secrets was to barter with words, to sell scraps of truth in exchange for bread, a place by the fire, or a kindness that might otherwise be withheld. You sit in the corner of a tavern, the rushes on the floor damp with spilled ale. Your clothes are patched, your shoes thin, and in your pocket there is nothing of worth. Yet you lean forward when the man beside you asks about the next wagon of grain, when it will arrive, what roads it will take. You know, because you passed the fields that morning, because you listen to farmers as they talk, because your ears are as sharp as your hunger. You speak softly, and he nods, sliding a crust across the table in thanks. You eat quickly, the bread gone in moments, but the knowledge you gave lingers, spent like coin. In the markets, whispers carry value. A woman tells another where a kind baker leaves his stale loaves at night, tucked in the alley for anyone desperate enough to find them. In return, she learns of a parish offering broth on Sundays, enough to bring her children there with hope. Secrets move faster than money, passed from mouth to mouth, traded not for wealth but for survival. Children become messengers in this hidden commerce. They hear things adults do not notice: merchants quarreling, servants gossiping, guards complaining of shortages. A child repeats the words at home, and soon the family knows which houses might need help mending, which farms will hire for a day, which shops throw their scraps late at night. Each word becomes a thread woven into the fabric of endurance. But trading in secrets carries risk. Speak too freely, and you may anger those with power. Betray a confidence, and you may find yourself turned out, unwelcome at the very places you depend on. The poor learn to weigh their words carefully, to barter knowledge as cautiously as a merchant weighs silver. A whisper too valuable can be both blessing and curse. At night, in crowded tenements, families huddle and share what they've learned. One speaks of a breadline that opened early, another of a landlord distracted and less watchful, another of a kind household that gave away bones for broth. These are the treasures of the poor, not coins or jewels, but bits of truth that make the next day bearable. Wealthy men deal in contracts, in ledgers, in gold sealed with wax. The poor deal in shadows, in overheard words, in the secrets that slip through cracks. And though these trades are unseen, they hold weight enough to tip the balance between starvation and another day alive. Trading in secrets was not noble nor safe, but it was currency nonetheless. In a world where silence meant hunger, a whispered truth could fill a pot, warm a bed, or open a door otherwise barred. For the poor, even words themselves became tools of survival. Winter did not only keep you cold, it kept you moving. For the poor of the 1700s, survival was often a journey measured in aching steps across frozen roads, miles traveled with nothing in your belly but the will to reach help. The long winter walk was a ritual endured by countless families, a slow procession through snow and ice toward a parish that might give alms, a distant relative with a crust to spare, or a market where scraps could be begged. You set out before dawn, the sky still dark, the air sharp enough to sting your lungs. Your shoes are patched with cloth and stuffed with straw, but already the snow seeps in, numbing your toes. A thin cloak hangs from your shoulders, the wind slipping through its holes as though it were no cloak at all. Behind you, children stumble, their breaths puffing white clouds, their hands hidden in sleeves too long for them. They do not complain, they know there is no room for words, no strength to waste on them. The road stretches endlessly, lined with bare hedges crusted in frost. Every step crunches against the frozen earth, echoing in the stillness. Fields lie empty, their soil hard as stone, their silence heavy. The only sounds are the caws of crows overhead and the steady rhythm of weary feet. You walk because you must, because stopping is not an option, because hunger drives you forward as fiercely as the wind pushes you back. Along the way, you pass others. A woman bent beneath the weight of a bundle of sticks, her face red from the cold. A group of men huddled together, traveling toward a parish poorhouse, their eyes hollow, their steps uneven. Each figure on the road carries the same story, nothing left at home, everything pinned on the chance that somewhere else might offer relief. There are no greetings exchanged, only brief glances that say enough, we are all the same, and we are all desperate. The children tire quickly. You lift the smallest onto your hip, their weight light as air, yet heavy with need. Your arms ache, your back protests, but you press on. Each mile feels longer than the last. Your breath grows ragged, your lips cracked from the wind. Hunger gnaws, sharper now than when you left, but the promise of reaching the parish keeps you moving. There, perhaps, a ladle of broth will be waiting, or a crust handed across the steps of the church. When at last you see the spire rising in the distance, your knees nearly give way. The sight is salvation, though you know nothing is certain. Sometimes the pot is empty by the time you arrive. Sometimes the priest shakes his head, saying there is no more to give, but still you walk, because even the chance of mercy is worth miles of suffering. The long winter walk was not just a journey of bodies, it was a journey of hope stretched thin, of faith carried on frozen feet. For the poor, every mile was a wager against despair, every step a prayer that at the end of the road there would be something, anything, to keep life going one day more. In the heart of winter, when cupboards were bare and fires too weak to warm a room, the faithful opened doors that otherwise stayed closed. Churches and chapels became more than places of prayer, they became lifelines. Soup kitchens, set up by parishes and charitable hands, gave the poor a chance to fill their bowls with something warm, if only for a night. They were not places of plenty, but for those who had gone days without, they were miracles served by ladle. You approach the chapel at dusk, your breath curling in the frosty air. Already a line stretches outside, men and women pressed close together, children clutching empty bowls and mugs. The windows glow faintly with candlelight, and from within drifts the thin smell of broth, onions, cabbage, maybe a bone boiled long enough to release its strength. The scent makes your stomach twist, and you step into line, joining the silent procession of the hungry. Inside, the air is heavy with steam and bodies. Benches are pulled aside, tables set with great iron pots simmering over low flames. Volunteers move quickly, sleeves rolled, their hands steady as they ladle broth into each waiting vessel. The broth is thin, watery, but it carries heat, and in that heat there is hope. You step forward, bowl in hand, eyes fixed on the pot. The ladle dips, rises, and tips its contents into your bowl. The sound of liquid filling it feels like salvation. You carry it carefully, as though it were treasure, and sit among the others. Around you, the room hums with low murmurs, spoons clinking against wooden bowls, sighs rising with each sip. Children slurp greedily, broth running down their chins, while their mothers hush them gently, urging them to slow, to make it last. Men cradle their bowls in both hands, drawing in the warmth as much as the food. For a moment, the ache of hunger is dulled, replaced by the comfort of heat spreading through empty bellies. The soup itself is meager bits of vegetable floating in cloudy water, perhaps a shred of meat if fortune favors you. Yet no one complains. To complain would be to risk losing your place tomorrow. Gratitude is as much a rule as silence. You nod your thanks to those who serve, though your heart wishes for more. You eat every drop, scraping the sides of the bowl, savoring even the smallest fragment of carrot or potato. When the bowls are empty, the line begins again. Those who came late, those who waited outside, still hoping the pot has not run dry. Sometimes it lasts, sometimes it does not. The last ladlefuls are often nothing more than warm water, but even that is accepted. Warm water is still better than cold hunger. Outside, the night settles heavy, snow drifting through the streets. You clutch your empty bowl, the taste of the broth still lingering, faint but real. Tomorrow the hunger will return. Tomorrow you may stand in line again, but tonight you walk home with something more than food. You carry the memory of warmth, of kindness, of survival shared among strangers. Soup kitchens of the faithful were not banquets. They were fragile sanctuaries where the poorest found a moment's reprieve, where hope was ladled thin but steady. For those who entered, bowl in hand, they were proof that even in the hardest winters mercy could still be found. In the narrow alleys of the city, where refuse piled high and windows leaked smoke into the streets, a strange song often drifted through the morning air. It was not a melody of joy, nor one of art. It was the cry of the rag collector, calling for scraps of cloth, torn shirts, worn stockings, anything the poor could spare. To the wealthy, it was nuisance. To the poor, it was survival, a chance to turn rags into coins, however few, and those coins into bread. You hear it first as a drawn-out chant, half-sung, half-called. Rags, old rags for sale, bring out your rags. The voice echoes between the buildings, rising above the clatter of carts and the caw of crows. Children peek from doorways, listening, then run inside to fetch the bundles their mothers have hidden away. A shirt too torn to patch again, a pair of stockings worn past repair, a scrap of linen kept for no reason but hope, these become currency in the rag collector's hands. The collector himself pushes a cart, its wheels squealing, its bed piled high with cloth of every kind. The colors blur together, faded blues, muddy browns, white stained to gray. His hands are rough, his eyes sharp, for he knows the worth of each scrap. To him, a rag is more than a rag. It is paper to be made, stuffing for a mattress, padding for a soldier's boot. It is profit. But to the poor, it is a loaf of bread, a ladle of broth, a night's reprieve from hunger. You step forward, clutching a bundle. The shirt once belonged to your father, patched so many times it is more thread than cloth. At last, it has given out, sleeves torn beyond mending. You hesitate before handing it over, as though giving away a piece of memory. The collector weighs it in his hands, then drops a coin into yours. It is small, thin, its surface dull, but its weight is heavy with meaning. Tonight, there will be bread. Children hum the rag collector's call as they play, mimicking his chant in high voices, their laughter quick before fading back into hunger. For them, the sound means a chance at food, a chance that their parents might bring something home. They watch as neighbors step out with their own offerings, aprons, kerchiefs, torn coats stripped of buttons. Each rag leaves a house emptier but also a little fuller, if the trade means survival. The streets carry the sound long after he is gone, the echo of wheels, the fading chant. For those who gave their rags, the day is brighter. For those with nothing left to trade, it is darker, the silence of their empty hands heavier than the weight of hunger itself. The rag collector's song is not music but necessity. It winds through the alleys like a hymn of poverty, a chorus calling all who have scraps to give. In its rhythm, you hear the truth of survival in the city, that nothing is wasted, that even rags can be turned to bread, that every scrap carries value when life itself hangs in the balance. When the cold pressed hardest, when frost crept across the inside of windows and the air in the cottage turned to ice, the fire was no longer a luxury. It was a matter of life or death. But firewood cost coin, and coin was always scarce. So the poor of the 1700s turned to what they had left, their furniture. Chairs, stools, even the wooden doors of cupboards were fed into the hearth, sacrificed piece by piece to keep the family alive through another bitter night. You remember the first time. The woodpile outside had been empty for days, the hedgerows picked bare of sticks. The children's breaths clouded in the dark air inside the cottage, and their fingers were blue despite the blankets piled on their laps. The hearth stood cold, a black mouth gaping open. At last, a decision was made. A stool, rough but sturdy, was dragged forward. Its legs scraped across the floor as though protesting. Then the hatchet fell, splintering wood into kindling. Soon, flames leapt up, crackling bright, and the room was filled with light and warmth. Relief washed over you, even as sorrow lingered. After that, it became a habit born of need. A chair missing one leg was broken apart, its back set aflame. The table's edge was trimmed for firewood, its corners steadily rounded by desperation. Shelves were dismantled, the boards laid carefully onto the flames. Each piece burned quickly, too quickly, vanishing into ash while the cold waited just beyond the door. Yet each fire meant another night survived, another morning lived to see. Children asked questions in whispers. What will we sit on? Where will we eat? The answers were always the same. Better to stand, better to eat on the floor, than to freeze in the night. They huddled close to the hearth, their eyes bright in the flickering light, their faces warmed for the first time in days. The fire became both savior and thief, giving life while stealing away the home itself. Neighbors did the same. You saw smoke rising from chimneys where only days before furniture had been hauled inside. The sounds of splitting wood echoed down lanes, not from forests but from homes tearing themselves apart. Cupboard doors vanished, stair rails disappeared, beds lost their frames until straw lay bare on the floor. The cottages grew emptier, hollower, yet still they glowed at night with the orange light of burning lives. Wealthier families could not imagine such choices. Their fires blazed all winter with oak logs stacked high, their furniture polished and safe. But for the poor, wood was wood, no matter its shape or purpose. A chair was not a chair when a child's teeth chattered through the night. It was fuel, it was fire. By spring the rooms looked stripped, their walls bare, their furniture gone. But the family lived, and that was all that mattered. Fires fed with furniture left scars, empty corners, missing stools, splintered memories. Yet in the harshest winters, those flames carried the poor through, proof that survival sometimes demanded burning even the very home you clung to. A bed in the 1700s was not always a frame of wood with a mattress stuffed full of feathers. For the poor, it was far simpler, far rougher. Hay and straw laid on the floor, heaped into corners, covered with whatever cloth could be spared. These beds were not made for comfort. They were made to keep bodies off the cold ground, to hold families close together, to give the weary a place to collapse after long days of hunger and labor. You lower yourself onto such a bed, the straw crackling beneath you. The smell rises, immediately dry, earthy, tinged with dust. Bits of stalk prick your skin through the thin sheet laid on top, scratching at your arms, clinging to your hair. It is not soft. It shifts with every movement, leaving hollows where your body presses, ridges where the straw gathers. Yet after hours of toil, even this rustling pile feels like relief. Children curl into the straw quickly, their laughter brief before sleep claims them. They burrow down, making nests, their small bodies hidden beneath rags used as blankets. They do not complain of the scratches or the dust, for they have never known feather beds. This is sleep to them, the sound of rustling stalks, the closeness of brothers and sisters breathing beside them, the faint warmth rising from bodies huddled together. The straw is not fresh. It is reused until it crumbles, flattened from nights of turning and pressing. Over time, it grows damp, musty, heavy with the smell of sweat and smoke. Insects creep into it, fleas and lice making homes in the stalks. Mothers shake it out in the morning, beating it with sticks, hoping to clear it of pests and dust before laying it down again. Still, the straw endures, for there is no other choice. In winter, more straw is piled on, thick as can be gathered, to create a barrier against the frozen floor. In summer, the straw grows thin, sometimes replaced by hay cut, fresh from fields. That hay smells sweet, almost pleasant, though it too soon turns musty in the dark corners of the room. Seasons change, but the bed remains the same, a heap of what the earth provides, shaped into a fragile cradle for tired bones. Wealthier homes boast four-poster beds with thick mattresses, feather pillows, and quilts sewn with care. But the poor measure their beds differently, not by softness, but by warmth, not by beauty, but by survival. A bed of straw may itch, may creak, may crumble, but it keeps the body from the bare ground, and that is enough. At night, as the fire dies, the family presses close together on the straw. Limbs overlap, breaths mingle, the blanket of rags pulled tight across them all. The straw shifts beneath, sighing with each movement, carrying the sound of sleep and endurance. You close your eyes, ignoring the prickles, the smell, the pests, and let exhaustion claim you. For in the world of the poor, beds of hay and straw were not symbols of poverty alone, they were symbols of life continuing, no matter how rough the ground beneath it. It comes without warning, though you have counted the days, felt them slip past like grains of sand. Rent is due, and when you cannot pay, you wait for it, the knock, the sound at the door that makes every stomach drop, every hand freeze, every breath catch. The dreaded knock of rent is not just a sound, it is a judgment, a reminder that even the roof above your head is borrowed and fragile. You sit by the hearth, patching a sleeve, when the first knock rattles the wood. It is firm, sharp, carrying authority. The children look up instantly, their eyes wide. A mother hushes them, though her own hands tremble. The knock comes again, louder this time. Everyone knows who it island. The landlord's man, or the landlord himself, standing outside with ledger in hand, ready to claim what is owed. You rise slowly, as though delay might soften the truth. The door creaks open, and the cold rushes in along with the man's shadow. He does not remove his hat, does not smile. His eyes scan the room quickly, taking in the patched clothes, the bare shelves, the thin fire. Then he looks at you. His voice is not cruel, but it is firm, carrying no room for excuses. Rent. It must be paid. You explain what he already knows, that work was scarce, that the harvest was thin, that sickness stole the few coins you had. You promise to pay soon, with the next wage, with the next chance. But he shakes his head. Promises do not keep a roof standing. Promises do not fill the ledger. He waits, hand outstretched, though he knows it will return empty. Behind you, the children press closer together, their faces pale. They know what the knock means. It means food might be taken, possessions sold. even the bed stripped away. It means eviction. The family turned into the street with no place to go but the poorhouse or the gutter. The air in the cottage feels heavy, the silence broken only by the crackle of the weak fire and the steady breath of the landlord's man as he waits. At last you hand him what little you have, a few coins, not enough, never enough. He takes them, notes the sum, and warns that the rest must come soon. His boots strike the floor as he turns, and then he is gone, the cold closing the door behind him. The silence that follows is worse than the knock. It lingers, filling every corner, reminding you that he will return. Neighbors whisper of families dragged out in winter, their belongings thrown into the snow, their children crying in the street. You pray it will not be you, but the knock will come again, and if you cannot answer with coin, it will mean the end of even this poor shelter. The dreaded knock of rent was the sound of poverty laid bare. It was the reminder that even the poorest did not truly own the little they had. Every home was fragile, every roof temporary, every wall subject to the ledger's call. And so you lived with the fear of that sound, waiting always for the day when the knock would not stop until everything you had was taken away. It stands at the edge of the market street, narrow and dark, its wooden sign swinging faintly in the wind. The paint is chipped, the windows dusty, yet the pawnshop door is never still. For the poor of the 1700s, it is a place both feared and needed, a last refuge when hunger presses too sharply, when rent looms, when survival demands payment that cannot be found elsewhere. You stand before it now, clutching something in your hand, a blanket, worn but still whole. It is not much, but it is all you can spare. The door looms heavy, its surface scarred by years of knocks and pushes. To open it is to admit defeat, to confess that you have nothing left but the memories woven into cloth, the weight of objects once needed, now sacrificed. Still, you reach forward, fingers trembling, and push. The door creaks open, spilling you into the dim interior. The pawnshop smells of dust and metal. Shelves line the walls, crowded with objects left behind by others, candlesticks, battered tools, pots with dented rims, a child's toy missing its wheel. They sit in silence, each one carrying a story of need. The shopkeeper stands behind his counter, eyes sharp, ledger open. He has seen faces like yours countless times, and his gaze carries no surprise. You place the blanket before him, smoothing it flat as though that will raise its worth. He inspects it quickly, fingers testing the fabric, eyes measuring its weight. Then he names his price too low, always too low. Your heart sinks, but you nod. Better a few coins than none. Better bread tonight than warmth tomorrow. He slides the coins across the counter, their dull clink echoing in the quiet room. You gather them quickly, ashamed and relieved in equal measure. Behind you, others wait their turn. A woman holds a kettle, its handle bent. A man clutches a Bible, his knuckles white, his face set in grim silence. A boy stands with a pair of boots far too large for him, handed down, now handed away. Each one will walk out with less than they brought, each one lighter in possession but heavier in hunger's shadow. The door is both a curse and a salvation. To pass through it is to lose something, but to stay away is to risk losing everything. The coins you clutch will not last long. They will turn into bread, into a ladle of broth, into rent pressed into the landlord's hand. Soon you will be back, carrying another possession, another piece of your home. And each time, the pawnshop takes a little more until the shelves at home are bare, until there is nothing left to trade but labor, or pride, or hope. When you step back into the street, the door closes behind you with a thud. It is not just wood meeting wood, it is the sound of survival bought and memory sold. The pawnshop door was the poor man's threshold, the line between holding on and letting go, crossed again and again until there was nothing left but the echo of its closing. When the winds rose and the skies darkened, the poor knew fear in a way the wealthy rarely did. For those with strong stone houses and tiled roofs, storms were inconvenience. But for the poor, who lived beneath thatch patched with straw, branches, or even rags, storms were danger. Rain did not just soak, it invaded. Wind did not just howl, it tore roofs away, exposing families to the sky itself. You remember the sound first, a low moan in the distance, the trees swaying, shutters banging against walls. The cottage creaks in reply, as though already straining against the weight of the coming night. Inside, the family gathers close, pushing straw against the cracks in the door, praying the roof above will hold. Each gust rattles the rafters, and dust falls from the beams, sprinkling down like warning. The storm breaks quickly. Rain lashes against the thatch, seeping through places too thin to resist. Drops fall into the room, splattering against the table, the floor, the beds of straw. A child squeals and is hushed quickly, wrapped tighter in a blanket already damp. Buckets are set out, bowls too, anything that might catch the water. Soon they fill, and more must be found. The cottage becomes a place of dripping, of pattering, of endless wetness that no fire can drive away. Then comes the fear of the roof itself. A howl of wind, sudden and fierce, lifts the thatch, peeling it back like cloth. You watch as a section flaps wildly, then rips free, carried into the night. Rain pours through the gap, striking the floor in sheets. Everyone scrambles, dragging furniture, pulling blankets, shifting the children to the driest corner left. Another gust, another groan, and more of the roof threatens to fly away. By morning, the storm passes, but the damage remains. Half the roof lies scattered across the hedges, sodden and broken. Inside, the straw beds are soaked, the walls streaked with water. Smoke refuses to rise from the hearth, the fire drowned. You shiver in the damp, teeth chattering, as you begin the slow work of patching again. More straw must be cut, more branches gathered, rags tied into place. The repairs are crude, never lasting, but they keep the rain out for a time. Until the next storm, neighbors share the same fate. You see cottages with gaping holes, families hauling branches to mend them, children carrying dripping bundles of straw. Some roofs are gone entirely, leaving nothing but the frame exposed to the sky. The wealthy ride past, their homes untouched, their carriages dry. They glance at the wreckage, then continue, their boots never sinking into the mud where you stand. Storms that swept the roofs were not rare, they were expected. Each season brought new winds, new rains, new nights of fear. For the poor, a roof was never permanent, never strong. It was only as steady as the weather allowed, and so you lived with the knowledge that the sky itself could break into your home at any moment, that safety was as fragile as straw against the storm. There is a kind of silence that chills more deeply than any wind. It is the silence of a hearth gone dark, its mouth wide and black, its stones cold to the touch. For the poor of the 1700s, the hearth was the center of life, the place of warmth, of cooking, of light, when the night stretched long. When it stood empty, so too did the home feel empty, its spirit hollowed by the absence of flame. You sit before it now, staring into ashes that no longer glow. Only yesterday, a small fire had crackled there, giving light enough to boil broth, warmth enough to gather the family close. Today, there is nothing. The wood is gone, the kindling spent, the pot sitting idle atop the grate. The silence is heavy, broken only by the soft whistle of wind slipping through cracks in the door. It presses in around you, filling the room with a weight you cannot shake. Children gather near the hearth, out of habit, even when no fire burns. They press their hands against the cold stones, hoping for warmth that does not come. Their breaths puff white in the air, their lips pale. One asks softly when the fire will return. You do not answer. Instead, you wrap them tighter in blankets too thin to block the cold. Their silence soon matches yours, and together you sit before the emptiness, waiting. The hearth's silence is more than cold, it is hunger. Without fire, there is no cooking. A pot of water stays icy, bread remains stale, scraps cannot be softened into broth. You look at the iron pot resting above the grate, its belly empty, its surface streaked with soot. It waits like you. but the silence promises nothing. Hunger sharpens in your belly, and you feel the same hollow inside you that stares back from the hearth. Neighbors know the same silence. You see it in the way their chimneys smoke only on rare days, in the way their windows glow faintly, if at all. Families sit in darkness, their rooms filled not with laughter but with coughs, their hearths no more alive than stones in the field. The silence spreads from house to house, a quiet chorus of cold that binds the poor together in unseen suffering. Wealthier homes never know this silence. Their hearths blaze each night, fires fed with logs stacked high, flames leaping until the rooms glow gold. Their children play in the warmth, their tables heavy with food cooked in pots that never cool. But for you, and for countless others, the hearth is too often an empty shell, a reminder that poverty takes not just comfort, but the very heart of the home. As night falls, the silence deepens. You lie down with the children, their small bodies pressed close, listening to the faint whistle of wind where the crackle of flame should be. Sleep comes slowly, carried on shivers, broken by dreams of warmth that never reaches you. The silence of the empty hearth is not just the absence of fire, it is the presence of despair. And yet, you endure it, waiting for the day when the crackle will return, when life will flicker again in the dark mouth of stone. When cupboards were bare and markets offered nothing a poor hand could afford, survival pushed families into the fields, the ditches, the wild edges of the land. Food did not come in loaves or roasts. It came in handfuls of green pulled from the soil, in weeds others passed by without thought. For the poor of the 1700s, gathering dandelions and weeds was not choice, it was necessity, the difference between hunger and another day, alive. You step into the meadow at dawn, the grass still wet with dew, the sky pale and thin above you. In your hand is a small basket, its weave loose, its handle frayed. You walk slowly, eyes lowered, searching the ground not for beauty but for food. The dandelions are everywhere, yellow blooms nodding in the breeze, jagged leaves spreading wide. To others, they are weeds. To you, they are dinner. You kneel and pull a clump, shaking the dirt from its roots. The leaves are bitter, you know, sharp on the tongue, but boiled long enough they will soften. Some will be tossed into broth to stretch it, others eaten as they are, chewed slowly to quiet the belly. The roots, too, can be roasted, ground into powder, steeped into a drink that pretends to be coffee. Nothing is wasted, nothing overlooked. Along the hedgerows you find nettles, their sting sharp against bare fingers. You wrap your hand in cloth before pulling them, knowing that once cooked, their bite will vanish, leaving a taste rich enough to pass for spinach. Dock leaves grow nearby, and though coarse, they will do. Chickweed creeps along the ground, its small leaves tender, easy to pluck by the handful. Each plant fills the basket slowly, a patchwork of green gathered from the wild. Children trail behind, their laughter faint but present. They tug at daisies, at clover, at anything green, asking if this too can be eaten. You shake your head at some, nod at others, teaching them the difference between what feeds and what poisons. Their small hands fill quickly, their pockets stuffed with weeds that will find their way into the pot tonight. Hunger teaches early, and the lessons of the hedgerow are as important as any book. Back in the cottage, the weeds are washed in cold water, dirt swirling away in the bowl. They are thrown into the pot, boiled until their bitterness fades into something edible. The smell is faint, earthy, not unpleasant, but far from enticing. Still, when ladled into bowls, the green broth brings warmth to empty stomachs. Children sip carefully, chewing the leaves, their faces solemn. It is not feast, but it is food. The wealthy do not know this taste. Their gardens are cleared of weeds, their tables heavy with bread, meat and fruit. But for the poor, the meadow and ditch are pantries, the weeds a lifeline. Gathering dandelions and weeds is not shame, it is survival written in green. Each leaf plucked is one more moment pushed against hunger, one more night endured. And so you return, season after season, eyes sharp for yellow blooms, hands steady in the nettles, baskets slowly filling with what the earth gives freely. The weeds whisper quietly in the pot, their bitterness softened by fire, their presence proof that even in poverty, life can still be gathered from the ground. There were days in the 1700s when survival narrowed to the simplest of measures, a crust of bread and a cup of water. Nothing more, nothing less. For the poor, this thin line between nourishment and starvation was all that kept life moving forward. It was not enough to fill the belly, nor enough to bring strength, but it was enough to remind you that you were still alive. You sit at the table, its wood scarred and uneven, a single loaf resting in the center. It is hard, its crust cracked, its middle stale. The knife you press into it grinds rather than cuts, sending crumbs scattering across the surface. Each piece you carve is small, smaller than you wish, because there are many mouths and only one loaf. The slices are laid carefully, each portion measured with eyes as much as with hand, so no one receives more than another. Hunger does not forgive unfairness. Beside the bread sits a jug of water drawn from the well. It is cloudy, a faint grit settling at the bottom. Still, it is all their island. Cups are filled halfway, enough to wet the throat but not enough to waste. The water carries no flavor, only the faint chill of stone and earth, but it washes the bread down, softens it just enough to chew. Together, the bread and water make a meal, if one dares call it that. Children nibble their slices slowly, dragging each bite across their tongues to make it last. They dip the bread into water, softening the crust, chewing until the crumbs dissolve. Their eyes flick to the loaf again and again, as though more might appear if they stare hard enough. A mother murmurs to eat carefully, to be thankful, though her own stomach growls beneath her words. The silence at the table is heavy. There is no chatter, no laughter, only the sound of chewing, of cups set down gently, of sighs too soft to be spoken aloud. You feel the hollowness inside you even as you eat, the bread filling nothing but the space between hunger and despair. It will not last. By evening, the gnawing will return, sharper than before, as though mocking the meager offering of the morning. Wealthy households never tasted this kind of meal. Their bread was soft, fresh from ovens, their tables lined with meats and cheeses, their cups filled with ale or wine. For the poor, bread and water were not symbols of simplicity but of desperation. They marked the edge of survival, the barest sustenance to push the body through another day of labor. When the loaf is gone, the crumbs are gathered, swept into a cloth, saved for tomorrow's broth. The jug is drained, the last drops shaken into a child's mouth. The table stands bare again, the silence returning heavier than before. And yet, life continues. The poor endure, walking the thin line of bread and water, balancing always between survival and collapse. It is a narrow line, a cruel line, but it is one that countless families walked, one crust, one sip at a time. And though it gave little strength, it gave enough. Enough to rise again, enough to keep moving, enough to live another day on the knife edge of hunger. Water was life, yet for the poor of the 1700s, even life demanded labor. Wells were not always close, and streams lay frozen in winter, forcing families to trudge through biting winds and thick frost just to fill a bucket. Carrying water in frost was not a chore, it was survival's command, repeated day after day until shoulders ached and hands cracked from the cold. You step outside at dawn, bucket in hand, the air sharp as knives, frost crunches beneath your thin shoes, each breath a plume of white drifting into the grey sky. The handle of the bucket bites at your fingers even before it is filled, the iron rim stiff with ice. You pull your cloak tighter, though it does little. Ahead stretches the long walk to the well, the ground glittering with frost, hedges stiff and white with rime. The path is worn from countless journeys, yet this morning it feels endless. Each step rattles your bones, each gust of wind steals warmth from your body. By the time you reach the well, your hands are numb, your lips cracked, and your stomach hollow with both hunger and cold. Others gather there already, figures bent and silent, each clutching their own buckets, each waiting their turn with quiet patience. No one speaks much, it is too cold for words. When at last it is your turn, you lower the rope, hearing the creak of wood and the distant splash as the bucket meets the icy water below. Pulling it up is harder than it should be, the rope stiff, your arms trembling. The bucket rises heavy, dripping, the cold seeping into your skin as you lift it to the ground. The water gleams dark in the faint light, a treasure drawn from the earth. Then comes the true burden, the walk back. The bucket is heavy now, sloshing against your leg, its weight pulling at your arm until your shoulder burns. You switch hands, then switch again, but it makes little difference. The frost bites harder with each step, and you must walk carefully, for a stumble could mean spilling everything, wasting the labor, forcing you to turn back and begin again. Children sometimes help, their small hands gripping the handles of smaller pails. They stumble more often, spilling half before reaching home, but they learn early that water must be carried no matter the cost. Their cheeks are red with cold, their eyes watering from the wind, yet still they march beside you, determined, because they know the family waits. Without water, there is no cooking, no washing, no broth to warm the night. When you return at last, arms aching, hands raw, the bucket is set beside the hearth. Steam rises faintly as it is poured into the pot, and the family gathers close, not just for the promise of warmth, but for the relief that the task is done, at least for now. Tomorrow, it will begin again. Carrying water in frost was not a single burden, it was the daily toll of survival. Each bucket lifted was proof of endurance. Each drop carried a reminder that life in poverty demanded strength, even in the smallest acts. The water, cold and heavy, was never just water. It was survival itself, borne home one frozen step at a time. Night does not bring peace in the crowded cottages and tenements of the 1700s. Darkness only reveals other companions, the kind no one chooses. Rats, bold and tireless, slipped into homes through cracks in the walls, through broken floorboards, through thatch above. They were as constant as hunger, and for the poor, to lie down at night often meant sharing the straw not just with family, but with vermin. You settle onto the bed of straw, its musty smell thick in your nose. The children curl close beside you, their breaths shallow, their limbs tangled beneath the ragged blanket. For a moment, all is still. Then comes the sound, the faint rustle in the corner, the quick scratch of claws against wood. You know it instantly, the rats are here. Their movements grow bolder as the night deepens. You hear them scurry across the floor, tiny feet clicking against the boards. One leaps onto the table, snuffling at the crumbs left from supper. Another noses along the wall, pausing now and then to gnaw at the wood. The sound is constant, a chorus of scratches and squeaks. You try to close your eyes, but the noise makes sleep thin and restless. Sometimes you feel them in the straw itself, darting close, brushing against your leg. A child whimpers softly, pulling their feet up, and you murmur comfort, though your own skin crawls. To chase the rats is useless. They scatter when you lunge, only to return moments later. They know you have nothing to defend the home, with no cat, no traps, no food sealed away in cupboards. They rule the night as surely as the cold does. The danger is more than discomfort. The rats gnaw holes in clothes, chew through sacks of grain, leave filth in the corners where children play. Their teeth flash at scraps, and sometimes at fingers too slow to pull away. Disease follows them, unseen but sharp, carried in their wake. Yet there is no choice but to endure. To live in poverty is to live with vermin, as constant a presence as smoke in the air or frost on the glass. In the wealthier houses, rats are an enemy kept at bay, chased by cats, barred by walls, poisoned and hunted. In your cottage, they are neighbors, unwelcome but unstoppable. You lie awake, listening, waiting for the scurry to quiet, knowing it never truly will. The rats leave only when dawn comes, slipping back into the cracks, their bellies full of crumbs stolen in the night. When morning light filters through the window, you rise and shake the straw, chasing them from the bedding. Bits of husk and dirt scatter across the floor. The children rubbed their eyes, already forgetting the shadows that moved beside them in the dark. You sweep the floor, though the scratches in the wood remain, reminders of the night's companions. Sleeping with rats was not a rare misfortune. It was the ordinary reality of poverty. You learned to live with their sound, their smell, their thefts, because you had no power to drive them away. And so each night, as you lay down in the straw, you braced yourself for the rustle in the corner, the brush of fur against your skin, the quiet knowledge that even in rest, you were never truly alone. In a world where hunger was constant and cold pressed against every wall, warmth became a treasure greater than gold. The poor of the 1700s did not measure comfort in luxuries, but in fleeting moments when fire touched their skin, when numb fingers thawed, when breath no longer fogged the air. The small joy of warmth was rare, but when it came, it was cherished with a reverence that wealthier folk could never understand. You remember the first spark, struck clumsily from flint, the glow catching in a bundle of dry straw, smoke curled upward, and then a flame, fragile at first, licking at the kindling. The children leaned close, eyes wide, their faces painted orange by the flicker. The fire grew, snapping and crackling, and suddenly the room felt alive again. Cold retreated, only a little, but enough to soften the ache in your bones. Everyone gathered close, knees almost touching the hearthstones. The pot was set above the flame, though it held little, only water, a few greens, perhaps a bone. Still, the sound of boiling was a comfort, the steam rising to mingle with the warmth. Hands stretched outward, palms open, soaking in every ounce of heat. For a while, the gnawing hunger was forgotten. Warmth dulled it, wrapping the body in a gentler need. Children laughed softly as they held their hands near, pulling them back quickly when the heat bit too sharply. Their cheeks flushed, their eyes brightened. A mother pressed her feet closer, sighing as the sting of frost eased away. A father leaned back, his face calm for the first time all day. Around the fire, words were spoken more easily, voices lighter, as though the flame itself fed not only the body but the spirit. The warmth was fleeting, always fleeting. The firewood burned fast, especially when it was only scraps, broken stools, splintered branches, whatever could be gathered. Every log placed on the fire was both a gift and a sacrifice. You watched the flames devour the wood, knowing each crackle brought you closer to the end, to ashes, to cold returning. Yet you savored it while it lasted, better a brief fire than none at all. Outside, the wind howled, rattling shutters and sweeping snow against the door, but inside, for that short span of time, you were safe. The warmth pushed back the world, creating a small circle of comfort where you could rest. Even the rats crept closer, their eyes glinting in the shadows, seeking the same heat. You did not chase them away. Tonight, even vermin were forgiven, for warmth was mercy shared by all. When the fire dwindled, its glow fading to embers, the silence grew heavier. The room cooled, breaths misted again, and blankets were pulled tighter. Yet the memory of warmth lingered, carried into sleep like a dream. Tomorrow, you would search again for wood, for scraps, for anything to bring the flame alive once more. The small joy of warmth was fragile, but it was enough. Enough to remind the poor that even in the hardest winters, life still carried sparks of mercy. Enough to give strength to rise again, to face another day of hunger, another night of frost. For in those few glowing hours, survival felt almost like living. Hunger ruled the days of the poor in the 1700s, but at night, when bodies finally sank into straw beds and the darkness pressed close, another world sometimes opened. Sleep offered escape, however brief, and dreams rose out of the silence like secret gifts. In those dreams, the poor were no longer bent with toil or hollow with want. For a few fragile hours, they could live beyond hunger. You lie down in the crowded bed, the fire long since gone cold, the children huddled close. The air is damp, the blanket thin, but exhaustion pulls your eyes shut. Hunger gnaws still, a dull ache in your stomach, yet the body is too weary to resist. Slowly, you drift into that other place. In the dream, the table is full. Bread lies in heaps, its crust golden, its smell filling the air. Bowls overflow with broth rich and thick, not watery but heavy with meat and vegetables. A roast sits at the center, steam curling from its skin, its juices glistening. You reach out, and the food does not vanish. You eat without rationing, without cutting pieces too small. You eat until you are full, truly full, something you have not known in waking life. The children laugh, crumbs on their cheeks, their eyes bright with joy instead of hollow with hunger. Other dreams bring warmth. The hearth roars with flame, logs stacked high beside it, enough to burn for nights without end. The room glows with orange light, the chill chased far away. You stretch your hands and feel not frost but comfort. The blankets on the bed are thick, heavy quilts, soft to the touch. You pull them around you, and the cold no longer has teeth. For the first time, you feel safe. Sometimes the dreams reach even further. You see yourself walking in fields not stripped bare but green with grain, the stalks high and full. The air smells sweet, the soil rich, and no overseer shouts at you to move faster. You gather what you want, not what you are allowed. The sky is wide, the day is yours, and hunger has no place here. But dreams end, morning comes, and the cold returns. The stomach growls as loudly as ever. The cupboard stands bare. The hearth is silent. The children wake, rubbing their eyes, and the day begins again with the same struggles. And yet, the dream lingers, faint but steady, a light carried into the hours of labor. Dreaming beyond hunger did not feed the body, but it fed something else, the spirit, the will to endure. Without dreams, despair might have broken families completely. With them, even the poorest carried a spark of hope, the memory of what life could be if only for a moment in sleep. The poor of the 1700s lived on scraps, on cold floors, on borrowed corners, but in their dreams they lived richly, fully, without fear of want. And though the morning always took it away, the memory remained, urging them onward. For in those fleeting visions, they remembered that life was meant for more than survival. Dreaming beyond hunger was, in its own way, a quiet act of defiance, a promise whispered in sleep that poverty could not silence the soul.